For more perspective, I'm joined by defense attorney Rodney Harris. Rodney, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And I can only imagine you were watching this as it all came down. Were you surprised?
Somewhat surprised, more so disappointed. And I say somewhat surprised. It's fairly unusual when you have the prosecutor's office here in Hamilton County with the 6-6 jury decide not to go forward. I recently had a double homicide in which it was 10-2 to acquit. And the assistant prosecutor in that case fought very hard to try to get the case retried. It was a judge who ruled on the acquittal, granted my motion to acquit. So, you know, surprised that way. Disappointed because we've sat through 2 trials. We've seen the video. We've heard a lot about it, and the jury couldn't come to a conclusion, so there's no resolution. So disappointed that way.
Joe Deters had said he would retry if he thought he could get a conviction. Why could he not get a conviction, especially when you consider you had the body cam video that many people thought would be a smoking gun? Absolutely.
I think the biggest problem, and if you listen closely to what Mr. Deters said during the press conference, he said there were some jurors that would never, just wouldn't convict. And the reason that's a bigger concern, because you wondered if they just wouldn't convict a police officer or if race had a real big play. And we don't want to talk about it, we don't want to think about it, but you have to wonder if this ultimately came down to race. And that's kind of what he insinuated from, listening to him in his press conference.
Do you believe that this was, as he said, the hardest decision he's ever had to make?
I'm sure it was a tough decision. I think he's well aware of how the community has cried out for a third trial. So I know it was a difficult decision. I'm sure it was difficult going to the Dubose family and explaining that you lost your loved one, you haven't had any resolution, and we're not going to try it again. But it's tough to say if it's the most difficult he's had to make.
Federal court, what chances does this case have of making it to that threshold and beyond?
Well, I go back to what I just said. What concerns me, although you may get a federal charge, you may get the feds to go forward on it, we're still talking about jurors, and if what Mr. Deters says holds true, that some jurors just will not convict a police officer under these type facts, whether it's a federal jury or whether it's a state jury, that causes me some concern, because remember, when we're talking about a federal case, we're talking not just about Southwest, we're talking about Southwest Ohio and not just Hamilton County. So again, the percentages in Hamilton County with diversity is approximately 25%. When you throw in some of the less diverse counties, it makes me wonder if some of the jurors in those counties would be comfortable in convicting on these facts.
We know how Sam Dubose's family feels, very, very upset. But if we broaden this out and take a look, what are the ramifications for Cincinnati and even greater the country with today's decision? Well,
I think that we have to take a look at our justice system as a whole. First of all, diversity in our prosecutor's office. Again, I think we all talked about in hearing this press conference that there's a big difference of opinion. There's a gap in the races and how we perceive things and how we look at things. So different prosecutors may see different ways of presenting it. So you want to have diversity that way. I think it's a point that we need to look at diversity on our bench. As our common pleas bench sits right now, in our general division, I believe there's 15 common pleas judges with only 1 African-American common pleas judge. 6 African-American common pleas judges in over 200 years. I think that's something we need to look closely at. Look at our jury source list and how we pull our jurors. Can we expand that to get a more diverse jury inside that courtroom? So I think it calls into question everything that we do, and if we can do a better job that way. Like I said, not just in the jurors, not just on the bench, but also in law enforcement, our police officers, our prosecutors, those kind of things. And I have a brother-in-law that's a police officer, I have a brother that's a prosecutor. But I think that's something that we need to look closely at to make sure that everything's fair across the board that way.
Rodney Harris, thank you for joining us. Certainly something that we're going to be talking about for a while.
Thank you for having me.
And you can find a complete wrap-up of our coverage today, right now, on WCPO.com.